Frogman Friday.
Yeah, boy.
Today, our badass guest is Mathew Lehnig. He served 30 years as a Navy SEAL, retiring from service as a Chief Warrant Officer 4. His current profession is the VP of Programs at Taking Point Leadership, which is established in 2013 in Rancho Santa Fe, California. You can follow Mathew on social media handles to follow the show. To learn more about Taking Point Leadership, go check out takingpointleadership.com. Brother, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, friend.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, but it's good. I mean, we've been connecting, man. This is always just amazing to reconnect and have these types of discussions and conversations, man. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, let's dig right in. Let's kick it off with just give a little bit of a background. 30 years of service is not something you can go through in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but that is an insane career. Walk us through that, and then we'll dig into transition and then where you're at today.
Sure. So, I graduated Bud's class 191. I believe that was January of 1994. And then, my first team was SEAL Team 1, and I did 4 PACOM deployments there out to Southeast Asia, which, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and all those areas. Great time. A lot of great deployments. And then from there, they pulled me over to STT. Chris Goob, Mike Lou. I mean, the list of just pipe hitters over there. And at the time, STT was under group. Eventually, it went under the center and became SQT, which is, I think, did you go through that course or did you go through STT? I can't remember.
Yeah, I was in the second class of STT or SQT.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. And then, it's quite funny. I went over to SEAL Team 5 just to have a conversation, kind of keep myself in the loop. And then that turned into it was really funny because I was talking to the Master Chief, who was the earlier Master Chief at STT, and then eventually, it became Senior Chief Cunningham, who unfortunately, we also lost to suicide, not too long ago. But the conversation ensued, and then that drive from the center over there was about 10 minutes, and during that time frame, I told the Master Chief, I'm like, hey, they were looking for somebody to jump into a platoon. I said, well, I'll have to talk about it. We just went under the center. I may be extended for a year. And so let me get over there. Let me have the talk. Well, in my drive over there, he was like, he wasn't waiting. So he called over, talked to Cunningham. I show up. Both of them are sitting kind of up on the top, on the edges there, screaming at me to come up in the office. I walk up. They're like, we heard you at Team 5 having this discussion. What the heck, man? I mean, you want to leave this place? And I'm like, whoa, man, like, simmer down. Like, I just talked to him. Well, you're leaving in 3 weeks. Pack your stuff. And I was like, again, totally God-led, timing, everything, So I was like, oh. And then, we deployed, with SEAL Team 503. I did 3 deployments over there downrange. I was part of the assault team. I was an assault team leader, shift lead, for a combat, dynamic combat PSD platoon. Senior enlisted advisor of a combat advisory team. I was an assault force commander and a ground force commander on several operations during those 3 deployments, from 03 to 07. And I was getting ready to do another platoon. And then they said, hey, man, you've got almost, 17 years of sea duty. I'd never done a shore duty. And so, at that time, I think a couple of guys, maybe 2 or 3 platoons, and then they sent guys to shore duty. And I couldn't fight it. I tried. I told them, I'm like, hey, man, you're setting me back 5 years. If you send me over to Bud's, I'm going to put in a warrant package. They did, and it was funny because I went over to the Master Chief, sat down with him, and, he's like, hey, Matt, it's great to see you. We're going to put you in, first phase. And I'm like, that's a horrible idea. Like, you just don't want to put me in first phase, man. Like, I will just destroy these kids. I'm not there mentally. I just got back off 3 tours of combat. Like, like, I don't think your mind is straight. And he looks at me and goes, well, it sounds like your mind's straight. So where would you like to go? I'm like, send me over to third phase. By that time, the kids are, they've kind of proven themselves. I can mentor them. It'd be great. And so I did that. And then, like I said, I told them, the Master Chiefs, I said, hey, if you take me over there, I'm going to put this commission in. And I did. Picked it up in 2008 and then put it on in April of 2010. The And then from there, I went out to Unit 1 for a couple of years, which was great. Went back to kind of the stomping grounds that I did early on at SEAL Team 1. Ran into a lot of the people that I trained in the 90s, 20 years later. So that was quite interesting. And then from there, I went over to I went over to Trade at 1, took out, ran assaults for a while. And then the Admiral wanted to get back to the sea. And at the time at Trade It, I was literally the only guy that had any experience in the water that was still left, because everybody had been fighting a war, for the last 12 years, I think, at the time. And so the OIC of Trade It, good friend of mine, brought me in his office, and he's like, "Hey," and I'm like, "You're gonna throw me in a maritime, aren't you?" He's like, "Look, Matt, got to do it." And so I said, "All right, man, don't talk to me for 3 months. I'm going to clean house. I need you to back me up on everything." Because as you well know, most of the time, the guys that were put into the maritime realm when it wasn't operational were kind of suspect.
Yeah.
And so, I kind of had to clean house there, but I brought in a lot of great talent. And it ended up being a blessing, because the reality is it set me up, for the last 9 years where, at that point I got asked to come out to Hawaii. And so I went over there, and I was actually going out there to be the Trade at 3 OIC, but the Commodore, who was a good friend of mine at the time, was like, "Nope, we need you as a 32." So I said, okay. I did that for 4 years. And then I took over as a Trade at 3 OIC, my last, you talk about the best tour you could have ever had. Your last tour was, being out there with the guys consistently, going out to the training sites, being a part of history, because, we divested of Group 3 and Group 10 and made Group 8. So being a part of that, pulling in all the ATC elements, really having just a great time with the guys out there, made a huge impact. So being out there in the undersea realm, a part of one of the most clandestine organizations for 9 years, was a phenomenal just way to end my career in NSW. I was up for W5. I was up to be the command warrant of Group 8, but the powers that be, my family, timing, my faith, everything else, with all of that kind of embroidered under one huge umbrella, I literally had to make the decision. And, I put in my retirement papers, which caused a little bit of a SHIT storm for a while. But, as anything else, man, the industrial complex is going to move forward. So you have to do what's best for you and your family. And my decision was to move on and, start the next journey in my life. So that was really kind of a quick snapshot of my career.
It's crazy, so for everybody listening, so to do 17 years of sea duty back to back is absolutely unheard of. It doesn't happen. And we were lucky if we got 3 pumps back to back before training. And usually it was 2. So that's 4 years to 6 years. 17 years, that is a dream. And then back when you started, everybody seemed to want to hang out in the E5 realm for a long period of time. That was the sweet spot. Right?
Bro. Yeah. So I was an E5. I am not kidding you, for probably 7, maybe almost 8 years, which was interesting because, it was we didn't have the SO rating back then. So, not only did you compete with the regular military, but I also picked a field that, to be honest, was really horrific. I came in as a photographer's mate, which was intel. And, at the time I didn't really care. All I wanted to do was operate. And I should have known better, because I showed up at SEAL Team 1, and the guy that was actually the photographer's mate, who was at the team running the intel shop, had been in for 15 years, and he was still an E5. So I should have saw the writing on the wall. I just didn't, right? I was like, nope. But because of that, it kept me operating for a very, very long time. Like, I didn't even do my LPO slot until I was on my 6th platoon.
Yeah.
So which was normal. I'll give you an example. My first LPO was a UDT 11 guy.
Wow, that's
so.
Awesome.
If that tells you anything, that's kind of the way it was. Now, as you well know, when we went under the SO rating, we went from this beautiful triangle to this leaning Tower of Pisa for quite some time, until the Master Chiefs figured it out. We're like, oh man, because everybody knew their job, so everybody was passing the exams, and so they were like, oh, we weren't expecting this. Yeah, so a little bit different time frame as well.
Well, so I was part of that same scenario where I was in aviation ordnance when I went in. So I had a test on AO and I had no clue what the job was. So you would fail every time. You're like, I literally have to show up and waste my time to fail this test. And then once they created SO, it was 100% pass rate. And so I bumped to E5 or to E6 from that because I had to start to E5. And so I'm like, I'm hosed. Like I'm past E5 now. Like I can't. And when I got in, I thought there was like, if you looked at the facts, I met a guy who was 20 years in who was an E5 when I joined. And I'm thinking, okay, so if you're an E5 and 20 years in, that guy's a master chief. So he's probably been in 500 years. Like, wow. Like, didn't realize, right? I didn't have any gauge on that. And it's so interesting, man. That's awesome. So, I mean, so this is the thing, like I served 8 years. So when I got out, transition was not easy it's not easy for a lot of guys for multiple reasons. Obviously, the most important thing is just not being around the boys, not being around the guys every day, like constantly. But let's walk through your transition because 30 years is not something you just walk away from. So would you share a little bit about that?
So, well, also, having that 30 years in gave me a completely different perspective. And so being at the higher levels, right? So, running, trade at one, being a part of, assaults and TGM, regardless, you're running those organizations. I had a lot of guys underneath me. And, during that time, I was kind of, guys were getting out, guys were transitioning. I was watching some guys that were very smart in the way that they transitioned. Some guys, had things set up. Eli Crane would have been a great example of that. The guy had his bottle company going and was setting all that up prior to getting out. So, he was very focused on what he was doing. I had other people that were getting out that are just like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. And I'm like, man, you've been in for 20 years. You've never thought about this. Now you're getting out. So I watched that whole process. So I knew that I was going to be, once I went over to Hawaii, that organization was so phenomenal. I stayed in and I knew I was going to do 30 years. I mean, that was the reality. I made my decision because what they were doing there was above and beyond anything and I'd ever seen within NSW. And so it intrigued me so much, I stayed in. But I knew that I was probably going to get out somewhere around 2022. And so at 2018, I decided to start my transition. So I started working with my uncle, Patrick, who was very well known in the organizations that I wanted to get into. And so we formed a 4-year plan. And in that plan, I went back and got my undergrad and graduate level degrees. So what was great was right about that time frame, our organization in the SEAL teams, we came out what was called the human factors program. And what that was kind of like you got to know each individual, each person from a very, personal level. So at first the guys didn't like it because it was really kind of intrusive, but it, really kind of honed in on 8 areas of each guy. So that was everything from mental, physical, emotional, family, money, all of that stuff, right? And the board, at my organization, because I ran trade at the time, I ran the board, but I also had psychs come in, you have your docs come in, you have all of these people, all the HPP, all of those. So people would come in. It was really not an individual, it was the division that led it. So the division chief would come in, the guys trusted him more. So they would help, they'd give him some information. We started helping guys. And, then it just took off. Guys, at least out in Hawaii, guys just jumped on that. So, we got them all of the information. Well, in that process, I was like, oh, wow, like this is a good thing. I need to kind of start honing. And it really helped out. You remember, I'm not going to say his last name, but if I say his first name, Benny, he was out there. He was my ops warrant. And, he would have gone to the very last day. But the problem was mentally, physically, he was not ready. But during one of those moments, he was very vulnerable and he just let it all out. And I literally pulled him out of his position. And for the next 8 months, man, we just got him everything that he needed and set him up for a good transition. And he's doing phenomenal now. So for me, I saw that and I'm like, all right, man, I really need to hone in. Like I have to, because like you said, 30 years is a long time. And the reality is you're institutionalized. It's like being in prison. You really get used to this battle rhythm. You get used to working with great people. And so all of this becomes a part of it. So, I was going through that process. And so I talked to my uncle Patrick. I'm like, hey man, I need to get some mentors. And so he connected me with, guys that were prior military that were CEOs of their own companies. Phenomenal gentlemen. One guy was a pilot, an Apache pilot, and started his own company, highly successful. And so I became really good friends with him, but it was more of a mentorship level. Then, again, being away from the flagpole was a little bit different because you didn't hear a lot of things. And so during that time, I heard about the Honor Foundation. And so I did my research and I was like, wow, I think this is going to be great. So I decided while I was doing all the mentorship with these gentlemen, I started the Honor Foundation. And that program really kind of hones you in on your why, right? So they've got a great program the first month that's really all about you, what you want to do and what is important to you, which I think I already kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do. This really kind of solidified that. Like you do a lot of, assessments, and in those assessments, it came out that I was either going to be an entrepreneur, right? Or I was going to be a consultant. Well, I'm both. So it just worked out great for me, right? So that helped me out. And then it gives you all of those, helps you with your social media accounts and all of your other things. And so the program itself, and, Matt Stephen, who's the, CEO, he has taken this organization to the next level, which I think is really, really phenomenal. But in that process, that really helped me out. And so what I did was, as I was building my resumes and I finally went my LinkedIn Live, I went to my mentors and I was like, hey, what do you think about this? Here's my program. Here's all my things. And they're like, oh man, this is great. Hey, let's get together. All of them turned into job opportunities, which was phenomenal, right? Because I had finished my degrees at this point. So I got my master's in strategic leadership with an emphasis on business analytics. I got my undergrad in organizational leadership and development. And then these mentors were like, hey, get project management. I would recommend this and this. And so I just went out and got them. And so, and the reality is I didn't get them just for the certifications or the degrees. I got them so that I could correlate my 30 years into the military, understand organizational speak, so that when my transition into the next stage, I understood their language. And I always tell guys how important that is, right? We have our own language in the military. That is the reality. But if you don't learn the language in the organization, so I guess you could call it battle prep is what I was doing.
Yep.
And so that helped out a lot. And about 2 years prior to retirement, at the same time, I was speaking to Brent, who runs the company that I'm a part of now. And, again, I still wasn't sure and things like that. But, those processes of getting those degrees, getting those certificates, working with the Honor Foundation really kind of set me on a great trajectory. And then it was, okay, well, now you're up for W-5. And so, of course, we're all team guys, right? And you always kind of want to get to that pinnacle, especially if you've been in as long as I have. And so, W-5 was the golden unicorn, the carrot that was kind of just sitting there dangling over my head. And I'm like, man, I don't know. There just seems to be so many opportunities out there right now. I feel like if I stay in and do 3 more years, some of those opportunities are going to pass me up. And so I had a really long conversation with my wife. We discussed that. And, that was a very deep discussion because, she's an incredible woman. And so, she kind of walked me through this process, she backed me the entire way, she helped me out. So I think, having that support from the family was also very important. And then, one of the things that I did, which is really kind of funny, I didn't know how to speak to women per se. And what I mean by that is obviously, in the SEAL teams, man, we don't have a lot of young ladies, right? We don't really talk to them that much. And so for 30 years, I really had no interaction.
Right.
So I talked to my uncle about that. And so he connected me with a young lady by the name of Janice. And she's phenomenal. She's a teacher. She runs her own businesses, highly successful. And so I got to meet her. And then, her and I, man, we role played for quite some time. She put me in some position. She listened to me. She's like, I wouldn't do that. Definitely don't do that. Don't do that. Because, as you well know, we're a little bit rough around the edges. We use some words that, can be a little bit intimidating and things like that. So that kind of helped me out. And that was really, so this process was going through. And I remember I slipped in my retirement papers And again, that caused a little bit of an uproar in the community because, I was going to be the command warrant of Group 8, but, they were moving to the East Coast. I didn't want to have anything to do with the East Coast. I was a West Coast guy, a Hawaii guy. Virginia Beach had nothing to offer me, man. And so, that was one of the main reasons as well. Plus, like I said, going through this process, you really see that what we have and the value that we add to organizations is, and I always tell guys that too. I'm like, never, underestimate your value to any organization and company that you have. And so, and I'm not going to say it wasn't difficult, because when I was going through the medical aspect of it, I had really stayed out of medical for 28 years. I mean, I knew, to be honest with you, brother, I knew I was a mess, right? Not only was I a mess, physically, but I also knew that I was kind of a mess, still kind of up in my head. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but, every once in a while you'll see me tick. And so I didn't really know what that was about. And through this process, I found out that I had TBI-induced Tourette's. Now, it isn't the go eat your, cuts it out. I just have certain ticks, where I can't sit still, and, that'll eventually get worse as time goes on. It's just shearing of the brain on the left side from so many breaches downrange and explosions and all the other stuff that we've been through in our career, especially 30 years. But
I don't know. I was looking at you, and I was thinking more along the lines of, you're looking at me like a new guy, and after this call, there's going to be some tape around me. So I don't know.
so, nah, man, those days, I kind of, my last 12 years, I went really high speed into a more, really strong mentorship role of guys, and again, it's where you go. I mean, I have never met the amount of professionalism that I did, out at FCVs. And that's why I think, when you talk about, a lot of guys don't really hear about that place just because of that reason, right? And when you see, what's behind the curtain, you're like, oh, okay, now I get it, right? And so, but again, it was really just, like I said, to correlate, to learn organizational speak. And then I really think that that's what set me up for that. But I mean, again, going back to the physicality part of it, I went through that process. It took 2 years, but I remember my first physical sit down, the guy's like, ooh, all right, I'm gonna have you go see this guy. And then it just kept escalating, and they're like, we need to send you to mental health. So, I went through the whole TBI process, and they're like, ooh, okay, your reflexes aren't as good as they should. All of these things that I was just kind of avoiding, because after combat, I was more in training the next generation. So I wasn't going down range anymore. So I could kind of get away, with that kind of stuff, because I wasn't running and gunning anymore. Right. But the reality is that process was kind of scary, man, because, that's when I realized I had all the shearing in my brain and all of these black spots, and, my cognitive wasn't where it used to be. I had, like, all of a sudden they're like, oh, by the way, you have these 3 surgeries that you need to get, or we're not letting you out of the military. And I'm like, what? So I had, 13 inches of my colon taken out. I had, multiple hernias that had to be fixed. Found out that I have fibrosis, and Dupuytren's disease and Lederho's disease, which are all incurable. They can't be cured. I just have to deal with them. I've got 2 lumps on my chest, which, they're trying to figure out if that's cancer or if it's from the chest tube that I got many years back. So they're still trying to figure that out. And so it's just all of these things. And I mean, it was so overwhelming, right? And so what I did was I was like, okay, I need to get my head straight. So I went and saw a psych. But, when we talk about it from a faith-based, I was like, okay, spiritually, I was okay because I'd given everything to the Lord, right? So it's pretty comfortable there. But the reality was my worldly state was here. So the 2 were not lined up.
Yeah.
So what I did was I got my shrink, who was also he was a military guy, awesome, trusted him. He was a part of the human factors board. So I got really close with him. I trusted the guy. And to be honest, I think that's probably the only reason why I went to that guy. And then I brought in my pasture, and they worked together, which you don't hear about, but they worked together, and they kind of got me. By the time I got out, I was about right there, so mentally I was okay. Spiritually, I was okay. I had bad OCD. And so I mean, I chased the doctors down because if I didn't get an end state to something that was wrong with me, I mean, I just pestered until, I'll give you an example. I mean, that was, my right eye, if I stare at the screen, it all blacks out. And so I didn't know why that was. And then they couldn't give me an answer. So finally, I went to the ophthalmologist in Hawaii, and this guy cleared his entire afternoon. And I mean, I went picture after picture after picture. He brought me in, we looked at it. I mean, this guy was phenomenal. And after 4.5 hours, what he realized is I have, from all of the overpressure and blast, I have so many floaters in my eyes that there's this massive chunk that is just sitting down on the lower left side of my eye. And so if you reverse it, it blacks out the whole top. But I never would have found that out if I did. Yeah, man. So I never would have found that out. And the good thing is, one of the companies that I work for now, one of the companies I partnered with, that's what they do. And so I was told that I could never fix this. And he's like, bro, yes, you can. And he connected me with a doctor out here. And so I had my first sit down with that guy next week. And so he's going to be able to kind of laser whatever that is, get it out of there so that my vision gets better. So again,
That's so
it's crazy.
interesting. I would love to talk with you offline about that company specifically, because that's the same thing. Like for me, I have, like, I'll just be outside one day and then my eye will turn into a kaleidoscope. It's super bright and I can't see straight through anything. And I'm like, what is going on? And it's like a half-day session. And I'm like, I wouldn't change anything about my service, but there's a lot of things that weren't on the dotted line when I signed. So I'm like, right.
Well, I mean, if you imagine, just think about this, like, when we were putting guys through SQT back in the late 90s, early 2000s, let's talk about Rocket Day, right? So here's Chris and I, right? We have 2 lines and we have about 26 rockets, and that's including the Carl G's, the AT4s, all of that, right? And how many of those Carl G's you're supposed to shoot in a day? Maybe 4?
Yeah, maybe.
Over a 6-hour period, right? And we shot all of those in 2 hours. And not only that, we did it for 6 classes for 2 years. And so, and again, they didn't have it all laid out, right? So here I am standing by, covering my balls and, shifting my head to the left, and then boom, that thing goes off. There'd be times where I'd have to go and lay down on my pillow after that. And literally, I'm not kidding you, blood would be coming out of my nose.
Jesus. So that's the thing, so, like, because war, same
just
thing,
all
like,
of that.
In war, there's you can't just do 2.
Nope.
Right? It's until that conflict or that tick is over with. And it's just, you're sending them. So, dude.
Whew. Yeah. And, then they come back and they're like, oh, by the way, you're only supposed to shoot 4 in like 6 hours because it can rip your heart apart and, tear your brain. I remember looking over at Chris and going, oh, man, we're screwed, man. Like, good Lord. And so, so that was quite interesting, right? But again, I mean, it is what it is, but again, that was part of the process, learning all of those things. And so when I left, I had my medical, I got my 100% disability. Where I moved in Texas was great because if you're 100% disabled, you don't have to go to the VA. So I'm not going to the VA. I've got my specialized doctor out here. My entire family goes there. He sends me out to whatever I need to go to. I don't have to wait. Like if I call him up the next day, I've got the appointments, so I feel comfortable there because, regardless, VAs are fantastic, but there's a backup. And so, I didn't want that because I wanted to make sure that I was consistently, where I needed to be mentally. And so because of that process, that getting that type of medical care outside was super important for me. And so, they keep me on point. I mean, I'm still doing great. I mean, even though I'm 100% disabled and I'm in pain, a lot of the time I still go out and do the things that I need to do with my kids, regardless. Like I'll go Monday and Wednesdays and Saturdays with my children to go jujitsu and MMA and boxing. But then Tuesdays and Thursdays and Sundays, I swell up because that's what fibrosis does, right?
Yeah.
But I'm willing to do all that stuff, man, just because, my kids are young and I'm like, I'll suck it up. That's our mentality, but now, I've got the meds and all the things to help with that. So, I'm not in dire pain consistently, but, I'm in a good place as far as that goes. So, so it was a difficult, but I think the 4 years and really setting myself up, because of the things that I saw in the first 26 years that happened to individuals, And then to be honest with you, I think what was even more, when I went through the Honor Foundation, right, I had 06s. Maybe every once in a while there'd be an 07, but a lot of 06s, 05s, and a lot of E9s that were like, I have no idea what I want to do once I get out. Like when I grow up, I guess is the term, right? I don't know. And I'm like, you're an 06, like you're an 07, and you have no idea what you want to do when you grow up. That to me was like, okay, I'm in the right place right now, because if there's guys at that level that literally have no idea what they're going to be doing with their lives, like, okay, I need to get myself, set up. And that's kind of where, that was really my drive, was not only that, but obviously setting up, my wife and my children and my family, so that they were clean and set up as well. So yeah, that was really kind of my transition. It was multidimensional, but I think if I would have left one piece of that out, it definitely would have caused, a ripple effect on all the other things. So, when I talk to people now, I'm like, I wrote an article about the 7 things that I did when I got out, and it just kind of walks through that process to make sure all of those areas are really, honed in on as you're getting out. But again, and then the other aspect is, the last thing I'll say on that was coming here to, Houston, where I'm at, great network out here. We've got like I told you, we got a good group of guys out here. We're always there for one another. And, we have breakfast on Saturdays when everybody's in town and we can all get together. So, that really helps. I mean, anybody can call me, I can call anybody, and they'll be at my house in like an hour or vice versa, depending on where we live, right? So it's a really tight network out here. And I think everybody has to have a little piece of that, especially, when you're getting out, that brotherhood and that camaraderie is such a huge part. It's going to be a part of your life for the rest of your life. And I think if you try to detour from that, it can become very problematic.
Absolutely. Well, huge shout out to the Honor Foundation. I have been seeing a lot of their work. I was not blessed to go through it. I don't believe they existed when I was getting out in 2010. But they have done unbelievable things. Everybody who is going through the program posts on their social media on LinkedIn that they're a fellow at the Honor Foundation. So a shout out to them. And I've been getting recently hit up on LinkedIn by a lot of the guys that are exiting service. So maybe it's something to help them with on this show as well. So,
Amen.
Well, let's dig into Taking Point leadership. So talk about this. What is this company? What are you doing? How can we support you? What does your clientele look like? Just give us all of it. What is it?
Yeah. So, like I said, a couple of years back, Brent and I started talking. So he started this company a while back. So I'll give you a little bit of a backstory, because I think that's part is important. So I trained Brent, he came through STT, and then, that's kind of put his class through. And then we ended up at SEAL Team 5 together deploying, in our 03 deployment. There's a couple great stories with him and I won't get into those on the platform, but man, they were phenomenal. But anyhow, we kept a really tight relationship for 20 years. So, he got out after, I think he did 7 years, similar to you, 7, 8 years, got out. And then he started and sold a bunch of companies. And during that time frame, he realized that leadership was really, really missing. So he was kind of, you've got a lot of guys out there doing that now. So he was kind of revolutionary on it. And, he went out and realized that. And then he wrote a book called Taking Point Leadership. And the book was based on a lot of the fundamentals that, within the SEAL teams, on how to, run teams and build teams and do all that. But it was also all of that research that he did, both qualitative and quantitative, that really helped him, read that book. And so, for the viewers out there, if you haven't read the book, Taking Point Leadership, I highly recommend it. It's a phenomenal book. We utilize a lot of those fundamentals now. Of course, we're updating a lot of those things as I've come in as the VP of programs. But again, that everything that's in that book is pretty phenomenal. So he started the company, it's doing really, really well. We're very agnostic in who we work with, because leadership fundamentals, they don't know any boundaries. So we work with everybody from, medical, high tech. We work from, AI. We do banks. We do, big companies. Global banking companies. We do, tech companies. We do to go into that process, it's a bunch, but we're very particular. Even though we're agnostic, we're very particular because we want to make sure that the companies that we work with really want to succeed. They really want to take this. Most of our programs are anywhere from 10 to 12 months long. So Brent will go in, or I'll go in, we do a keynote, we'll do a workshop, and then from there, we'll build out if the company wants to go further, which a lot of them do. We do a ton of assessments on the organization. My job is to take all of that quantitative data, look for all the gaps, look for all the blockages and all the opportunities within that organization and why it is where it is in its state right now. And then I build out a program to really take that organization to the next level. And so, really kind of honing in on those gaps, those blockages, and those things that are really stopping organizations from moving forward. And the cool thing about that is in these programs, when we do all these in-person or virtual programs, we have actionable takeaways. And so we give the companies quite a while to implement those. We help them do that. So if they want to rebuild their mission statements or their vision statements, or if they want to really kind of hone in on their values or anything like that, we make all of those measurable, right? Because, a mission statement's great, but if it's not measurable, it doesn't mean anything, right? You can be like, it's just a bunch of words, a piece of paper, but we show them how to define that, how to make all of that measurable and actionable. And I think for me, I'm not one of those guys because of my OCD. I can't do like a 1 or 2 day thing and then walk away from a company. And so that's why we're very particular, because we know if we go in with these keynotes and these workshops, that the organizations that we're doing this with are going to want that longer program. And so for me to be able to watch an organization from day one to 10 months out, 12 months out, and see just how far they've gone, to me, that is super gratifying. And that's what I did. Really, that's how I correlated that, because the last 10 years of my career, that's what I did with individuals that I worked with, right? And not only did I do it professionally with them, but I also did that personally, meaning, if they wanted to do something in the SEAL teams, then I'm like, here's the schools I can send you to. But outside of that, I'm like, hey, go back for your bachelor's degree. Like when I was at Traded, I had 6 guys get their bachelor's degrees, and I had 3 or 4 guys get their master's degrees. I had a couple guys that got into MIT, right? And that's just because I pushed them outside of their, not only their professional, I wanted to say, hey, listen, you need to have these skill sets when you get out. And so, again, being with companies and being able to take that and give that type of knowledge, that tacit knowledge, of course, to these companies has been really, really amazing. And so I think I've been with the company for about 1 year and 3 months now. I've written, a multitude of Forbes articles for the company. I've done some keynote speaking. I do a lot of facilitation, both in person and virtually. I do a lot of executive coaching for senior executives, CEOs. And so it's very, again, we're very broad in what we can do with companies and organizations. And so, that's what I really loved about it. It wasn't one thing, really. We build custom designed programs specifically for that organization. So each one is different because every organization is different. Some people want to work on engagement. Some people want to work on processes. Some people want to work on leadership development. Some want organizational development. And so, that's kind of what differs us from most leadership companies. A lot of companies will come in, they'll do assessments, and they're like, oh, here's your stuff, and then they're out. And people are like, okay, well, how do I implement this? And so for me, I just couldn't be a part of one of those companies or those organizations. Like I said, my OCD wouldn't let me do that. And so we've graduated since I've been here. We've graduated 4 companies. And then not only we graduated with those 4 companies, but now we're working, because we usually start at the C-suite, senior executive levels. We align the company at the senior levels. Now, then we move down into the middle management, and then we move down into the frontline workers. And so those 4 companies that we graduated, now we're working with their middle managers. So the companies come back because they see the value that we bring to the organization. So, Taking Point Academy was one of Brent's books. He also wrote another book called Embrace the Suck, which I'm sure you've heard of or read. So he wrote that, and that's just another way to look at things and kind of, again, it's based around, personal and professional mindsets for people to get themselves to move. Like we can do so much more than we think we can do. We just need to make sure we have these things set up in a way that we can get from point A to point Z. Some people just have it's a little bit hard for them to get there, and so we come in and we help them move their companies into the direction that they need to go to. So that's kind of what we do. And yeah, it has been, for me, I've been truly blessed. And the other aspect I'll say is the friendships and the partnerships that we've made. Like I talk to these guys on a regular basis outside of, the companies themselves. We text all the time. I mean, we've just become good friends, and I think that's that personal aspect that, a lot of companies don't get into. These guys will ask me questions, they'll ping things off of me, and it's just great to have that. And so I love doing that. It's my passion. And so to be a part of an organization, a company that lets me really not only do that, but, go out and above and beyond the organization and really mentor me. Like Brent's been phenomenal in the mentorship aspect. So
I love the idea of taking it C-suite first and going down. So I've been asked over the years to give keynote speeches, and I laughed, right? Because I was told as a SEAL to shut my mouth and never tell stories. And then I'm like, hey, cool. And then I get out and people wanted to start doing this speaking where they tell your story. And then it went into, would you talk about leadership, which I don't teach leadership because I don't focus on that being my bread and butter of what I do. Sure. I like the base jump and jump off of stuff. So a little different environment, not in a cubicle per se. But what I would find most of the time with C-suite is that they would want me to come in and do a speech that would rivet them so much that it would change and boost morale. And I'm like, that's not how it works. Just because somebody says something one time in a speech, it's going to be fun while it's there. They're going to leave the conference or whatever happy. They're going to go back to their same rituals. So if you want somebody to actually help boost morale, change the dichotomy of the group, then you have to be surgically in placed. And it starts with the C-suite. It starts with the C-suite. They're going to watch your actions. Everybody watches the leaders, see how they do, and then it traverses from there. So I love that aspect of it, and definitely have some companies for you. When you talked about being agnostic, do you primarily work with the well-established companies and at a certain size? Obviously, it varies. Is it startup as well? Is it getting ready for selling? I mean, what does that look like?
So we hit 500 and 100.
Okay.
So that's kind of our bread and butter. However, if there's a 50, it depends on how rapidly it's growing, right? And I think that's also very important. And again, it's also, we have a part of our team that'll go in prior to, they do the assessment, through the discussions, what the company wants, what they're looking for. And then again, do they really want to succeed? Are they going to go through the process? Because, we're not sitting there saying, hey man, we're going to come in one day and, the information that we're going to give you is going to take you where you need to go. It doesn't, like you said, it doesn't work that way, right? There's all of these fundamentals that we have to do. There's all these assessments we have to do. There's all these one-on-one interviews that we have to do, and that could be everything from team dynamics to 360s to interviews and everything else, right? And then again, getting all of that information is super important. So if we do have a startup company, a 50 company that's, they're crushing it, they're expanding. Again, they're young, right? And so some of these CEOs are very young. They don't have a lot of those skill sets when we talk about leadership, but who really wants that and really wants that organization to expand. And so if we see that in a company, in a 50, company that's really like, man, I know I want to grow this company out, but I need to make sure that I have some professionals that are coming in to help me build my mission and my vision and make sure my values and the people that I bring in also understand the mission and the vision, and we have the same values and they know where I want this company to go, then those are the companies that we love to work with. Like the 100 and the 500, they're established, but yet they realize that they need to bring a company in to help them move to the next level. And so again, but we go through that process. I mean, if a company doesn't align, we'll come back and be like, hey, you're not right for us. Like, because the reality is, from what of course we don't say it that way, but we'll say something to the effect of, I think, you need a little bit more maturity, perhaps. Maybe you need to do a few more things, and then come back to us. Because we're not like the year end, hey, you've got this amount of money left. Hey, we'll come in. If it's something like that, we really have to look at the company hard. If we're going to come in and do a keynote or whatever. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not that we're not going to do that, because again, obviously we utilize those keynotes and those other areas to really kind of build our brand, make sure. So if it's a huge convention and we've got 250 people there from all over the business world, of course we're going to go in, because we want them to see what we bring to the table. But when we talk about working for a company specifically, though we're agnostic to the companies that we work through, we want to ensure that that company, is going to do the work. Because what I will tell you is, Taking Point Leadership, we have never had a company that we worked with that has said, no, we're not going to work with this company ever again. That's the reality. Because we come in, we do what we say we're going to do. We're very good at what we do. And so usually, like I said, we'll move from the C-suite to the senior executive level, and we'll just start moving down to the company. If the company's global, so, not only do we work with companies here in the United States, but we also work with companies abroad. And so if they're a global organization and they say, hey, we've got a company out in Sweden or in Norway or in Finland or the UK, we want to get you guys out there, we'll fly out there, and we'll just make sure that the company is worldwide aligned. And so we've never had a company, like I said, that has given us a bad review or hasn't worked with us again after the fact, because, we bring a lot to the table. So I think, yeah, we would work at the level, but again, it's the individual, it's the company, it's what they want to do, how far they want to expand, and do they really, really want to do that? And through our assessments, we can see that. We can see if a company really wants to push forward.
That's awesome. How do people find out about you? How do they get in touch with you?
So obviously, we have a lot of our websites that we have, out there. So we've got Take Point Leadership. We're on all the social media platforms that are out there. Myself and Brent Gleason are all on the social media platforms as well. So you can read our content. If you go onto Forbes and you look up Brent Gleason, or you look up myself, Mathew Lehnig, a ton of our articles will come up. They're all based around leadership development, strategic leadership, and so on and so forth. So you can take a look at those articles. We've written, I think in the last year, I've written 6 or 7 that have been published. And then we build a lot of our curriculum based around those articles. We do a lot of research on really what companies need. And so we'll build those articles around them. We'll build a lot of curriculum around that. So you can go through those. You can, pull us up on keynotes. You want our company to come in and do a keynote and do a workshop. And those workshops, again, they're not just run-of-the-mill workshops. These things are workshops that we'll do that your company needs, and you will have actionable takeaways when you leave that workshop. So that's a big difference. There's a difference between, coming in and going, do these things, and then leaving. No, that's not what we do. We come in, we do a lot of research on your company before we come and do a keynote with that type of workshop. So, and the workshop is based off something that you need within your organization. We're not going to say bring in all 50 of your problems, but bring in one and let's talk about that. And then you're going to leave with actionable insights. And I think when people see that and they implement those actionable insights, and they're like, okay, man, this is legit. We need to bring this company and this organization in. So again, that's kind of the way you can connect with us. And, we're, like I said, we're also at, a lot of the big conventions that are out there. We're at multiple conventions that come out. We do keynote speaking at all of those. So again, I think a lot of it too is companies, word of mouth, them going out to other companies in similar fields and so on, and pushing things out. But yeah, so our website is a big one. We just revamped everything. So we've got a lot of our success stories on there. We've got a lot of our, we have a lot of resources on there. So if you go on there and you want to do after action reviews, you can upload one of our books just on how to run a great after action review or a debrief. So there's all of these little takeaways from there. We go into exactly what the company does. And then, like I said, you can go to each one of our personal as well as our professional accounts through LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, so on and so forth.
Got it. Well, if you're watching this show, if you follow it and you're a team guy, then you share this shit out. That's an imperative thing. So we'll get this out as well. So this is really interesting stuff. I definitely know some companies that would take interest, definitely need the help. And it's just about getting them to drop ego, which is commonly the thing up at the C-suite.
It is.
So, but definitely going to connect you with them. I always end this thing on a special note is I always ask each person who served, like, I want to hear a hero story. I want you to share something with people because we always talk about, we don't ever forget. We always want to keep the legacy of our brothers alive. And there's always that particular, always more than one now that we've had so many years of combat. But is there one shining star out there for you that you want to give a quick talk to the public about and tell them?
Are you talking about individual?
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, wow. You know, Ryan, man, that's a tough one. You know, for somebody who's been in for 30 years, you know, I mean, the time frame that I was at SQT from 1999 to 2002, I mean, we had the amount of heroes that came in during that time frame is, I mean, phenomenal. You know, I mean, we had guys like Jason Tomlinson, we had guys like Matt Mills, we had, you know, Danny Deeds, we had Matt Axelton. I mean, we just had, you know, Chris Kyle. I mean, the list. To be honest with you, I don't really know if I could give a single name. I have every single person that is passed downrange or from suicide is tattooed on my body. And so
I understand, brother. Yeah. I get it. Well,
yeah, that's
brother.
Yeah, that's
keep honoring them, brother.
Yeah, that's a tough one, man. What I will say is, you know, I loved and continue to love every single one of them. They were my brothers, man.
Amen, so, brother.
I am, you know, the good thing is I am, you know, sorry.
Hey, you're good.
So, you know, I've got one of the things too is there's at the end of this year, I've got a book coming out. It's called Atonement to Redemption, you know, Uncommon Leadership During Uncommon Times. And there's going to be a lot of incredible just stories of heroism and valor and a lot of other things that are going to be in that book just from my time in the 30 years and all of the extraordinary people that I've come across, you know, from those that mentored me to, you know, the people that I've been fortunate enough to mentor along the way. And then, of course, you know, I don't look at it, even though you know, some people say from that perspective, I mean, I have literally, when you talk about, you know, standing next to giants, man, I've and, you know, been in battle with some of the most incredible people out there. And so if you go on my LinkedIn, there's a couple little excerpts, you know, that I've written, you know, kind of on that. I think I've got two, and every couple months I'll release one, but it just kind of talks about certain things that drove me and, you know, my passion and kind of how I was raised and, you know, influences and things like that. So guys can check that out. But yeah, I wasn't really prepared for that question, as you can see. But I think for me, it's just every single person that we've lost, not only in combat, but I think also after combat, from the combat wounds, you know, that, you know, I mean, I think in the last year, we've had 7 people commit suicide, you know, and those are all from, you know, related to combat experiences. You know, I mean, we just, you know, lost, you know, a day not too long ago. And, you know, we just lost, you know, one of Jimmy's really, really close friends. You know, he was the CEO, I think, of SEAL Team 3 at the time. Again, my TBI is kicking in, but yeah. So, you know, for me, you know, war is a son of a gun, and that transition is a son of a gun, so I think it's so important what you're doing, to really kind of help these guys. It's so important for guys to really understand, their value when they get out. It's really super important to have that network of the brotherhood, and, the reality is you really have to, and again, I've seen this and I say this all the time, man, Jesus, man, he's the truth, the way, and the life. I mean, you gotta have the Lord, man. I mean, we can't do this on our own. We have our brotherhood, we have everything else, but you need to have the Lord with you as well. And that's for me, that's a fundamental. That's how I live my life. Fundamentally, is Jesus is truly my Lord and Savior, amen. And He's helped me through all of this. So for that, I give Him all the glory. And so I would tell guys, your organization, your program, what you're doing, how you fundamentally build that off of those values, man, is that's phenomenal. And that's great. That's incredible, because guys really need to understand, man, that, there's a heavenly Father there, man. He's always there for you. He'll never forsake you. He was the same in the beginning. He's the same now, and he'll continue to be the same throughout. He doesn't change, man. And he's always there. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that, brother.
Dude, when you get that book ready to release, let's get you back on and share it out, because that'll be fun to dissect that one as well. I can't learn enough.
Sure.
I'm still a floating idiot. So, well, there you have it. You got Mathew Lehnig, and you got takingpointleadership.com. Go check it out. We're going to put all the handles and all the information at the end of this show so you can follow up. Definitely go give them a shout and go check them out, follow them, and we'll send some people your way, brother.
All right, bro.
You're the man.
Amen. Amen, bro. You too.